Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining us today. This is part of a series of educational webinars on energy infrastructure throughout New York State, co-hosted by myself and my organization, Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and of course, my colleague, Julie Ty at the New York League of Conservation Voters. So we appreciate everyone joining us to learn more. I'm going to be very quick. Today's webinar is really in response to people asking questions. What is this new proposal by Propel Energy Infrastructure, and why do we need it? Where will it be? And what purpose does it serve? As you all know, New York is going through one of the greatest transitions of all times, frankly, which is transitioning our energy infrastructure away from fossil fuels towards more renewables. In order to do that, we need to also strengthen our grid. And the grid is old and it is needs to be modernized. So this particular project is one that was chosen and selected after careful review by New York State NYSERDA and is now on its way to being part of our new energy infrastructure. So we want to have these forums so you can get all the information you need. You can get it right from the developer and their talented staff. And this way, you can be as informed and educated and updated as possible. That's what these are about. We are recording this. We will be posting the recording on our YouTube channel. We'll be sending it out. And yes, for all of you who are going to ask in the chat, if you will be able to get access to the PowerPoints, the answer right now is yes. We will be sending them out in an email to you. Anybody who registered will get the PowerPoint presentation. Also will get the link to the video of this Zoom. So please don't worry about that. We will do that. We do it just as a matter of routine because we know you're going to ask it and we know there'll be important details that you'll want to retain and review. So thank you again. I'm going to turn it over to Julie Ty.
Great. Thanks, Adrienne. And thanks to all of you for joining us for our Lunch and Learn with Propel New York Energy. We talk a lot about the emissions reductions goals set out in the New York's landmark Climate Act. And we talk a lot about the need to green our grid in order to get there. And it's true, right? If we don't produce energy from renewable sources like offshore wind, solar, and hydropower, our reliance on planet-warming fossil fuels is going to continue. However, while renewable energy production is a necessary component of our clean energy transition, it's not sufficient. There's no transition without transmission. All the clean energy in the world won't matter if we don't have the transmission capacity to deliver it to the homes and businesses across the state that need it. That's why, as part of the budget negotiations continuing in Albany, a little late, but we're hoping to finish soon, lawmakers are debating a proposal called the Renewable Action Through Project Interconnection and Deployment, or the RAPID Act, which is going to streamline the build out of transmission infrastructure across the state to create a flexible, reliable, and clean grid. And it's something that we're keeping a close eye on in Albany as the budget negotiations continue. But while they're debating in Albany, Propel New York Energy is getting to work bolstering the electric transmission network, the backbone of the energy grid on Long Island, New York City, and across Westchester to aid New York in achieving our climate goals. So we're hoping that this project is going to help to improve the reliability and resiliency of our grid and help deliver more clean energy, including offshore wind, into the New York State electric grid. So thanks to our partners at Citizens Campaign for the Environment for co-organizing, and thanks to Propel New York for being here today. And mostly thanks to all of you who are taking time to be with us. Now I'm going to introduce our panel. We have Anna Stokovic, who is Senior Program Director with the New York Power Authority, Steve Cole-Hatcher, who is Project Director of New York Transco, and Shannon Bakavenis, who's Director of Communications and Public Affairs for New York Transco. I'm hoping I pronounced everyone's names close. And with that, I think, Anna, you're going to start us off.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you, everybody here, for participating and having the Propel New York Energy team here today. This is a great opportunity for us to share the preliminary project details in advance of our upcoming regulatory activities. Thank you to CCE and the League for hosting this event, and we appreciate your leadership on so many areas that are advancing the state's clean energy goals. As mentioned, I'm Anna Stahoviak. I'm the project director from NYPA on this collaborative project, and I'm joined by Steve Cole-Hatchard, our project director, and Shannon Baxavain, heads up public affairs for New York Transco. This is an innovative and transformative clean energy transmission project that you mentioned. We need to make this transition to clean energy, and it was selected by the New York Independent System Operator. So we know that there's lots of questions out there about the project, and we hope to answer as many as possible today. There's a ton to cover, and within our presentation, we want to review with you the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how for the project. If that's not enough, we have some more to cover, give you a brief background and history on how did this project come about, the next steps that we'll be taking, how we plan to engage and reach the communities that will be impacted, and the overall project benefits that we'll see through completing this project. Additionally, I know the presentation will be sent out, so there will be some project contact information that is part of the presentation, and we look forward to following up on any questions that may come up after this webinar. As we go through this presentation, just wanted to put a reminder out there that we're still in the early phases of the project. Well, the project has been selected. We still have to go through regulatory approval. So all of the mapping that you see here today is preliminary and is subject to modifications as we go through that process and refine the project. So starting off with the who are we? The Propel New York Energy team is a joint development between the New York Power Authority and New York Transco, two organizations within New York State with significant expertise and experience in developing, siting, constructing, and operating electric transmission assets across the state. New York Power Authority is the largest state public power utility in the U.S. We have 16 generating facilities across the state and operate over 1,400 miles of transmission lines. 80% of the electricity that New York Power Authority produces is from clean hydropower. New York Transco is a developer, owner, and operator of bulk electric transmission facilities here in New York, and they own and operate about 120 miles of transmission lines and associated substations throughout the state. We're a great complement to each other, and we're excited to bring these benefits to the greater state. So taking a step back, just taking a quick look at energy delivery, we feel that transmission is sometimes overlooked, although I think just today there was another New York Times article about the importance of transmission and increasing that capacity. So it's not just, it was a New York Times article, but it's not just particular to New York State, right? It's across the country, and even, throughout the world, that this link is missing in some regards as we transition to that clean energy future that we all are looking forward to getting to. So people don't think about it. You flip your light switch on, and how did that electricity get to you? So this is that piece of the puzzle, the transmission piece. That's the backbone of the electric grid. It gets the power from where it's generated to the homes and the businesses where it's used the most. You can think of the transmission like the interstate highway for the electric network. So just important to note there as well that Propel is not tied to any single generation, but once in service, will provide those lanes like the interstate highway that move the power into and out of the region effectively and economically. So New York has nation-leading climate and energy goals, and those goals are just around the corner. Because of leadership of many people on this call, we have a plan to get our communities and the environment to a place to meet those goals. Getting to 70% renewable by 2030 is a challenge, and the way that we get there is in part through a bolstered electric transmission system. What you may not know is that most of the New York electric grid was put into service before 1980. There's been projects recently in upstate New York that have replaced 100-year-old transmission assets. So the time is now to replace some of these assets and bolster our electric grid for the future. The system was not built to manage the growing demands of the increasing electric society or the climate goals that we have out there. And for those reasons, the transmission grid needs to be upgraded and built out. We need to act fast, move forward these priority projects, and do it in a community-focused manner that puts New York first. And that's what we strive to do here with this Propel New York Energy project. So just wanted to take another step back on the specifics of this project and start off with what is a PPTN. We have it here in the title of this slide, but I don't know that it's in everybody's everyday vernacular. So a PPTN is a public policy transmission need. It's first identified by the New York State Public Service Commission, who oversees the utilities here in New York State. They open a public process to examine the transmission system and identify upgrades and additional investments that need to be made. They look at where the system is most constrained, and then they look to the future and forecast where the demand will be the greatest. There's a great dichotomy in the New York State electric grid, known as the tale of two grids. It's been there for years, and the challenge is bringing the carbon-free electricity from upstate to the demands of downstate New York. This project is one of those pieces to help solve that tale of two grids, to deliver that clean energy to the consumers where they're using it. So back in March of 2021, the New York State Public Service Commission identified the latest need for transmission. The need was identified similar to all of the needs that have been identified to relieve the existing congestion on the transmission system, add capacity to the transmission network, and build out the reliability and resiliency of the overall system to move more clean energy. On this map that you see here, the red and the blue bubbles denote where the system is existing, constrained in the existing layout. So the New York Independent System Operator, or commonly referred to as the NYISO, they manage the bulk power grid for the state. They took that need and issued a competitive solicitation in the summer of 2021. 4 developers proposed 19 different solutions. After almost 2 years of evaluations, the NYISO selected the Propel New York project as the more efficient or effective project. And the project meets the needs identified, which is to relieve the bottlenecks on the system, increase the transfer capability between Long Island and the rest of the statewide grid, bolster reliability and resiliency, and create the pathways to deliver clean energy, including offshore wind resources, into the rest of the statewide grid. So covering a couple of our W's, the what, the where, the why, and the when here. The project is going to build approximately 90 miles of new underground and submarine transmission lines. And the goal is to use the existing public rights of ways, meaning the public roads. We go through portions of Nassau, Suffolk, Queens, Bronx, and Westchester counties. And we'll also be constructing 4 new substations with the intent of building those on utility-owned property to, again, minimize area impacts. We're in the early phases of the project. Engineering is ongoing. Survey work is really getting ramped up now as we speak, and outreach efforts like these to engage the communities that we will be impacting. We anticipate kicking off the permitting with an application to the New York State Public Service Commission later this summer. And then from that point, we anticipate about 2 years to get through the permitting process, which will put us starting construction in mid-2026. The construction is anticipated to take about 4 years, and we look to put the project into service by the mid-2030. So mentioned that we're looking to put 90 miles of new underground and submarine transmission lines in. So this is a high-level look of where all of those miles of transmission are going to be going. It's primarily 345 kV, and then one line will be a 138 kV line. And those transmission lines go through parts of Nassau County, a small portion of Suffolk County, through the eastern edge of Queens, the Bronx, Westchester County. And then again, we have those 4 new substations that we will be building as part of it. So all of the lines will be 345, as I said, except for the one that is going from Shore Road to Syosset. So that's that tealish, bluish color going from Shore Road to Syosset. So that transmission line, again, it will be underground, but it will be a 138 kV line. And then the other important note on this is that we are creating 3 ties from Long Island to the rest of the statewide grid. You may be looking at this map and wondering where those 3 ties are, but the transmission line going from Shore Road to Springbrook, that's actually 2 circuits there. So those are 2 lines that go across the Long Island Sound there. And then we have our other tie that goes from Queens into the Bronx. The existing and the new substations are noted by those split orange and blue pin drops. The existing stations that will interconnect into are noted with the orange pin drops. And then the green circle in New Rochelle is a proposed new transition station. So this is where we would bring those submarine cables that are going in the Long Island Sound and turn them into land cables to bring them the rest of the way to that Springbrook substation. The project is reflective of the innovative design and our goal of reducing impacts as much as possible by using the existing public rights-of-way and utility property. And again, we create those 3 new ties to the rest of the state, and those are bidirectional ties between Long Island and the rest of the state, meaning that the power can be moved in multiple directions as needed, importing power from other parts of the state, and then when conditions exist, exporting power off Long Island into the other parts of the state. And the build out of the network will boost the reliability and help facilitate electric demand now and into the future. So we wanted to go over some common questions about the technology that we plan to use. So while we call it an innovative solution, the core of the project is technology that's been around for a long time. So in the case of our project, installing 6 new underground submarine 345 kV lines. The cables at this voltage are not unique. It's commonly used not only in the US, but around the world. Here in New York State, we have about 11,000 miles of transmission lines that are at 115 kV or higher. Of those 11,000 miles, almost 830 miles are underground. And then of those 830, 240 miles are 345 kV. So that means that nearly 30% of the underground transmission lines in New York State today are 345 kV. And similar to all of the project information here being preliminary, this information comes from the NYSO's Gold Book, which is going to be updated later this year. So these numbers may vary slightly, but overall, this is the big picture of where the transmission system in New York State sits today. Another common item that comes up in electric transmission, both underground and overhead projects, is EMF, or the electric and magnetic fields. So just high level, anything that generates or transmits or uses electricity are sources of EMF, right? So things in our daily lives, the wiring in our homes, when you go and plug in something to an electrical outlet, our appliances, cell phones, hair dryers, all of that are sources of EMF. And research has been conducted on this EMF since the 70s by independent scientific experts and organizations such as the World Health Organization, the National Institutes for Health, and to date, none have concluded EMF sources as a cause of adverse effects on human or animal health. Further, here in New York State, we're one of the few states that have EMF standards, and the project will fully intend to comply with those standards. And so any new electric transmission project installed here in New York State has to meet these standards, which stipulate that a magnetic field cannot exceed 200 milligauss. An electric field cannot exceed 1.6 kV per meter at the edge of your right-of-way. So for this project, we're using underground cables, and that eliminates the electric field entirely as it's contained within the thick outer sheath that protects the cable. But we fully intend to comply and design the project to meet the magnetic field requirements that are set forth by the state, as well as all other environmental and compliance requirements. So wanted to go through just a quick overview of the core construction methods that we anticipate to use on the project. In general, all of our methods, the goal is to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts. And these, again, specifically are preliminary details, and final methods are subject to the engineering, the surveying, the equipment suppliers, the construction contractors, and obviously the regulatory approvals as well. But just to go through it at a high level, the underground construction in a public right-of-way, we would use a typical trenching method that underground utilities are using day in and day out around the state. So the trench would be approximately 2 to 3 feet wide, and then it would go a minimum of 3 feet deep. And the installation would come in a variety of different skilled crews coming in for various functions, almost like an assembly line. So, you can see on the picture here, kind of just step down the various different aspects of it. One crew comes in and saw cuts the trench, and then the next comes in and removes the pavement and excavates the trench, and on to the next and on to the next as they each go through their piece. And then once we're complete, the intent will be to restore to better or prior to better conditions. And again, all subject to the regulatory reviews and approvals that we will be applying for the project. Very similarly is the submarine underground construction. Ongoing surveying work is happening right now, and that will determine the submarine cable installation methods, which will go across Hempstead Harbor and the Long Island Sound. But generally, we get an idea of how this will be installed here. You'll see here on the picture, a jet plow or cable burial device would be used for installing the cable in the seabed. The depth of that will be determined once the surveying is complete and we go through that permitting process. They've been using this installation method for quite a long time now. And the submarine cable manufacturer will further inform how the construction process actually goes through. We've begun meeting with different marine groups, and once we have more routing and installation details, we'll expand that outreach to additional groups and organizations. So one last construction method that we wanted to highlight here is the horizontal directional drill, or HDD. Again, a construction method that's not new, been around for over 40 years. And the main goal is to avoid impacts to sensitive areas. So whether that's a major roadway intersection, a railroad, or something that has some environmental significance, the goal would be to avoid that by creating a conduit underneath that area and then pulling the cable through the conduit up to the other side. So you avoid that trenching in that area that is particularly sensitive, and minimize the disturbance. You do need significant areas on either side of that. So it's not, shown here, you have just, a cable reel on one side, but you do need some space to make sure that you can pull those back. So it's not a perfect answer for all situations, but to the extent that it can be used, we will use it to avoid those sensitive areas. And now I will turn it over to Steve, who's going to go through some of our routing details for the various segments of the project.
Thanks, Anna. Good afternoon, everybody. Before we get into the actual routes themselves, we'll give a little bit of background as to how we actually picked the routes. We did go through during the development stage some very extensive routing workshops and analysis to review and determine the best paths to get from point to point or substation to substation. As we go through this process, we do use a matrix of factors to determine the impacts while balancing both the electrical needs of the project, so which stations need to be connected to which ones, as well as the cost of the project as a whole. Our routing matrix and the analysis that accompanies it does look at a number of factors. A majority of them are listed there. What we try to do is we try to strike the appropriate balance for installing the infrastructure from an impact perspective as well as a cost perspectives. The routes that we'll show you for the 6 segments today, again, they are all noted as preliminary because they are not yet approved by the regulators. The routes will stay preliminary until we have our final construction permits as we get through the permitting phase. I will highlight that, as the NYSO did work their way through the review of all the different proposals, they did highlight that our routes were evaluated as favorable compared to some of the other routes that were submitted. While we're not anticipating significant deviations from the routes that we'll show everybody today, we will look forward to sharing them and discussing with the various communities and the stakeholders for feedback that might inform some further routing decisions in the future. We'll get into further detail and discussions about the routing at upcoming community houses in May and June that Shannon will be able to speak to at the end of the presentation. And with that, we'll flip on to an overview slide of the routing breakdown. Again, this is all preliminary information. This provides a nice summary of the routes through the different areas. As you can see, Long Island does have a bulk of the routing, including the submarine cable out in the Long Island Sound. There's approximately 66 miles in Nassau County, and 2 new substations will be built next to existing substations. There is a smaller portion, it's a little bit over 1.5 miles out in Suffolk County, as well as a new substation in Ruin Road, which we will get into more detail about. There's approximately 12 miles in the New York City area. It's the eastern part of Queens as we cross over from Long Island, and the portion of the Bronx before we get to Con Edison's existing Tremont substation. In Westchester County, there's approximately 9 miles of land cable and 3 miles of the submarine cable as we come across the Sound. And then there is the new transition station as well that Anna had talked about. From the submarine portion itself, it's about a 9-mile crossing of the Sound between Oyster Bay and New Rochelle. On the south side of the crossing in Long Island, we do come into Hempstead Harbor. And then on the north side of the crossing, we do come into the New Rochelle area. The split on that 9 miles is shown here on the slide. A touch over 6 miles in Long Island in the Sound, and then about 3.5 miles in Westchester in the Sound. As we dive into a little bit more detail, we'll start in the town of Hempstead in Nassau County, which is the southern piece of the project. There are 3 segments of the line that are shown here in the town. It totals about 12 miles. The new Barrett substation will also be built next to existing utility infrastructure. The green line that goes from the bottom of the picture up towards the top, that is the Barrett to EGC line. It will be connecting the new substation that we will be building near the existing Barrett substation, and it runs approximately 8.8 miles along the streets that are listed on the map off to the left, up to the existing EGC substation in Uniondale. Out of that EGC station is the start of 2 additional lines, the EGC to Tremont line. That's a blue line that will pop up into North Hempstead and then ultimately make its way through Queens and the Bronx. And then the purple line that is shown there is the line that will go up to the new Shore Road line as well. The next town here is the town of North Hempstead. There are 2 segments of underground lines and 1 submarine component. Shown in the breakout in the bottom right-hand side is, boxed out in blue is the area of the submarine component. The total in the town of North Hempstead is approximately 19.5 miles. The different villages that we will be crossing through are also shown there. The blue line that starts at the existing EGC substation continues into North Hempstead until it crosses out into Queens. And then the purple line, EGC to Shore Road, continues through North Hempstead until it crosses up into Oyster Bay. And then again, I touched on this a bit before, but a section of the submarine cable does cross through the North Hempstead portion of the Hempstead Harbor as well. That's denoted in pink in the bottom right-hand side of the slide here. As we make our way up into the town of Oyster Bay, there are 3 segments of underground routes. And again, this submarine cable does continue into the town of Oyster Bay. The town of Oyster Bay does have approximately 33 miles in it. The new Shore Road substation will also be built here. I'll start from a routing perspective on the top left-hand corner of the slide here at the new Shore Road substation, which will be built on existing utility-owned property. If we start with the first line, it's the purple line. It's EGC to Shore Road, which we just talked about. It continues through North Hempstead and into Oyster Bay. It will terminate at the new Shore Road substation again that will be built on existing utility-owned property. The second line is the blue line. It's approximately a 16-mile underground line, again, 345 kV. It does start at the new Shore Road substation and extends to the new Ruland Road substation, which will be built next to existing utility-owned infrastructure in Huntington in Suffolk County. And the final line in Oyster Bay that we will touch on from an underground perspective is the Cyan line. It's the 138 kV line that goes from the new Shore Road substation to the existing Syosset substation. Again, the existing Syosset substation is an existing station under the control of LIPA. Here shortly. As we cross over into Suffolk County, into the town of Huntington, again, only about 1.5 miles, we do come down Spagnoli Road, and then we ultimately make the right onto Broad Hollow, Ruland Road, and then we go into existing utility-owned property in the town of Huntington, where we will also be building the new Ruland Road substation. If we want to talk about the submarine crossing, again, this is the crossing of the Long Island Sound. It is the pink line as shown here on the diagram itself. It's about a 9-mile crossing of the harbor and the Sound. It does start in Oyster Bay. It does pop out right across the town boundary line into North Hempstead, and then it makes its way across the Long Island Sound. As Anna had mentioned, this is a double circuit 345 kV crossing. This is the only section of the project that will use a submarine cable crossing. The rest of the routing that's shown here on this slide will be standard, underground cable as opposed to submarine cable. If we follow along the submarine route, we will cross into New Rochelle. Once we cross the Long Island Sound, we do come into New Rochelle. The current plan is to come into the parking lot of the Hudson Park and Beach, and then we will continue with the submarine cable to a site of utility-owned property off of Echo Avenue. That will be the site of the new transition station where we will use some infrastructure to turn the submarine cable into land-based cable. Once we make that transition from the 2 different types of cables, we will continue with the underground work in New Rochelle until we transition into the new municipality, the town and village of Pelham. There's about 3 miles of cabling in New Rochelle. It's a short trip into the town and village of Pelham, about 0.2 miles in the town before we do cross into the city of Mount Vernon. The city of Mount Vernon, we're in for an even shorter amount of time. It's approximately 53 feet. The town, boundaries almost converge on one another here at the T of Robbins Road, but there's about a 53 feet that the double circuit 345 kV lines will be in the city of Mount Vernon. Once we cross through the city of Mount Vernon, we'll get to the town of Eastchester. This is approximately 3 miles that we cross the town of Eastchester before continuing into Yonkers. There are two crossings that we wanted to call out here. We do have to get underneath the Hutchinson River Parkway. We'll be doing that via an underpass roadway, and then we will have a trenchless crossing near the Cross County Parkway, very similar to what Anna talked about before with the HDD drilling. As we make our way into the city of Yonkers, there's again approximately 2.5 miles in the city of Yonkers. We do make the crossing in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide near the Bronx River Parkway. As we work through the city of Yonkers, we do have to make our way across the Springbrook Parkway, which is by the clover leaves on the left half of the picture here. And then ultimately, once we get across the Springbrook Parkway, we'll find our way through some roads, and then we'll ultimately terminate in Con Edison's existing Springbrook substation. Again, that's an existing substation that the two 345 kV lines will be terminating into. We'll now turn to New York City for a route overview there as well. If we think back to the original lines that we went through, this is the East Garden City to Tremont segment. Just under 8 miles will be in eastern Queens until we reach the East River. There is a key crossing again here of the Cross Island Parkway towards Fort Totten, if you're familiar with the area. Again, we will be making the crossing of the Cross Island Parkway there via an underpass roadway. And then ultimately, we will make our way up to the terminal point in Queens County, where it's just to the east of the Whitestone Bridge, and where we will use a HDD construction method to go under the East River from Queens and ultimately connect into the Bronx. As we make our way into the Bronx, we are currently slated to make landfall with that HDD at Ferry Point. We will, transition through the park there with the underground cable still. These are all underground cables. We will ultimately make our way towards Westchester Creek, where we'll have another HDD that will go underneath the creek and make landfall on Zuriga Avenue. And then we'll take Zuriga Avenue and the local streets up into, again, Con Edison's existing station. In this case, this single circuit 345 kV line will tie into Con Edison's existing Tremont substation. Total mileage in the Bronx is just a touch under 4 miles. And that is actually the final routing map that we have to share here. Now that we've gone through the various routing elements, I'll turn it over to Shannon, who will walk through the current activities and what's coming next from an outreach perspective. Take it away, Shannon.
Thanks, Steve.
I just want to say, Shannon, keep in mind we have a lot of questions in the chat. We want to leave questions at the end to time at the end to get to those questions. Thank you.
We'll be efficient with these last few. So I just wanted to point out on the timing, we are still in those early stages. We're in that blue box pre-permitting. So we are doing outreach. We are sharpening our engineering pencils with some of the survey work that's coming through, as well as taking regular feedback from the stakeholder conversations that we're having. That will be ongoing, that sort of communication throughout the entire life cycle of this project until we get into our in-service date in May of 2030. That permitting effort that we've spoken about, which is an application to the New York State Public Service Commission for an Article 7, we're looking to get kicked off later this summer. So leading up to that, we will have some public open houses, and we'll continue the communication and outreach in a variety of channels and forums to keep folks looped in, engaged, and participatory in that permitting process. Once we get to the construction and restoration phase, construction we're estimating to begin in mid-2026, pending regulatory approvals. We'll have about 4 years of construction. That does not mean we will be in any one geographic area for 4 years. It's 4 years for the entire 90 miles and 4 stations to be constructed. We will have a detailed outreach and engagement plan throughout that construction period to give folks a heads up on all of the efforts we'll be undertaking. We do expect multiple crews out at one point in time in different geographies. And once we get that, that schedule for construction activities further refined through the permitting process, We look forward to getting stakeholder feedback on that. And then, as Anna had noted at the beginning, we go back in once construction's complete and restore to prior to or better than prior to condition. And that'll be part of the stakeholder process and the regulatory outcomes of the Article 7 process. So we're very much looking forward to going through this detailed and robust regulatory effort, as well as stakeholder engagement initiative, in order to get the best project constructed and in service to bring benefits to New Yorkers. So in terms of engagement, our motto is early, often, and inclusive. We want to make sure we bring as much information out to folks and have you contact back with our team so that we can get the best components of this project in place in a timely manner and a cost-effective manner, and ultimately getting the project in service to bring benefits throughout the state. We do have a toll-free hotline set up. Please feel free to reach out. Our team members are monitoring that. We'll get back to you with any questions you might have. We also have an info@propelnyenergy.com email address. Same thing, please feel free to email us. And our website, propelnyenergy.com, will be regularly updated as we go through the different phases of the project. The next phase that we'll enter into are open houses. So we will be pushing out advertisements and information on those very shortly. We do anticipate a lot of feedback during those, which will help inform the project and our submission later this summer to the Public Service Commission. If at any time there are meetings, opportunities for us to brief organizations, groups, community members, we are willing to do that. The door is always open, and we look forward to engaging with everybody as we go through this really important project for New York State. We oftentimes get a lot of questions about the procurement efforts of the project. We're still at the very early stages of that as well. More information will be going out about procurement and supplier opportunities, construction contract opportunities. Everything will be competitively bid and put out on public websites for folks to tap into. That will be included on the propelnyenergy.com website. We fully expect that this project will leverage all of the skilled union workers that we have across the state of New York, that both NYPA and Transco have worked with on many other projects, to successfully and safely put this project into construction and into service. So we're excited to be moving that forward. So please keep your eyes and ears open. There's a lot more coming on the project. The website does have translation capabilities. And we hope that you'll be able to use those. We did send out a letter to all of the abutting neighbors to the project. There's about 10,000 abutting neighbors to our project. We'll continue with direct mail to those neighbors as we go through the different phases of the project. And there are the open houses that we have. They're listed there, the initial dates and general locations. We will be pushing out advertisements and additional information on those open houses in the coming days and weeks. So please stay tuned. And I don't think we need to reiterate all of the benefits of this project, but it's critical to not only New York's environment, but our shared economy, and making sure that we have the energy delivery system ready to go to meet all of our needs now and into the future. We are thrilled to be here to move forward at such an important project. We look forward to working with all of you and welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Was that it, Shannon?
That's it.
Okay,
turn it over to you.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions. I'm going to ask the team at Propel, Shannon, Anna, and Steve, to answer very succinctly so we can get to all of them and people don't feel that they, didn't get their question answered. I do also want everyone to know that if you join WindWorks Long Island and just get your email in there, we will be sending out the list of open houses and the dates and locations for your convenience. So it's another way to stay in the know and stay in touch with all of these energy infrastructure projects. Okay, I'll do the first one, Julie, then we'll tag team. The first two are actually basically the same. I don't know if they're from the same person, but electric bills on Long Island are very high. They assume that the cost of this will go onto customer bills. Is there another cost that will go away to make up this cost? How does the pricing work, I guess, is the question here.
So as you probably would expect, we don't control pricing. We don't issue bills on projects. That is part of the whole process between the New York Independent System Operator and the Public Service Commission. So the PSC has ordered the NYSO to apply their typical tariff rate, which means that ratepayers across the state of New York will pay for the capital costs of Propel New York Energy. That is something that goes on the transmission portion of bills. That's typical for how transmission projects like this are paid for across the state. And that's as much as we can say right now. We don't have any further information at this juncture.
But I think the good news is here, I think this person might be from Long Island because they said Long Island rates are high. This is something that'll be amortized across the state, which makes it much better than amortizing it over people just on one geographical location, such as Long Island. Julie?
Well, I'm going to do a follow-up question on that because it's a nice follow-on and not go in order, but why did the PSC decide to identify this need as a PPTN or a public policy transmission need versus solely based on reliability need? What are the implications of this decision? Since I think we just got at part of that answer.
Right. So it being a public policy transmission need, the cost can be spread out across the entire state through those existing functions. So that's one benefit. And obviously a project like this, transmission like this, benefits the statewide. It's not just localized to one area. Obviously, significant benefits, whether it's from greenhouse gas reduction, the ability to move clean energy from northern New York further downstate, or from downstate upstate. There's a lot of multi-benefits that are seen across the state, and therefore the project is paid for accordingly.
Thank you. I'm going to get Richard's question in here, and Grant, I'm not ignoring your question. Richard is asking, thank you for the information. Is there a community benefit or mitigation component to this project?
So as a ratepayer funded project, we do not have community benefits. It would not be a prudent use of ratepayer funds to put that into community benefits. There are a multitude of benefits, obviously, as a result of the project. We anticipate about 2,000 jobs throughout the construction period supported by Propel, as well as about $2.4 billion in economic activity during that construction period. But we are interested in working with all of the stakeholders. We've been out meeting with some of the local elected officials, community leaders, community groups, and getting a lot of ideas about ways in which we can collaborate moving forward on the project.
Okay. But I think the short answer is no. It's not like an offshore wind project where they can come in and give a community benefits project. This is NYPA, the New York Power Authority, that cannot use ratepayers' funds in such a manner. Okay. Grant, understanding that you are a developer, will you be including a PLA, Project Labor Agreement, MOU, in your bid specs for anyone looking to do your work? In other words, will there be a project labor agreement?
We will require construction contractors, once the bidding goes out, we will require them to use New York State Union labor. In many cases, there are existing PLAs that can be leveraged from those existing construction contractors. And if new ones are required, it would be up to them to execute those.
Great. Okay. The question is, ideally, this project will use current best practices. Will the proposed work be compatible and interoperable with microgrid controllers and other sustainable power standards, especially as identified in the IEEE 2030 series of standards?
Steve, Anna?
That's a tough question, Shannon. I would have to look at the microgrid standards themselves, and I would say from an operation perspective, right, it all goes back to the NYSO. They're actually the ones who are operating the grid. I think part of the PPTN process is them identifying what the actual issue they're seeing on the grid, and then ultimately let the developers propose what the solution is. But operating it will ultimately fall back on the NYSO.
Okay, moving rapidly along. Okay, will HDD be used in the submarine sections?
Yes. Okay. That's an easy one.
That's what I like. A nice, succinct question. Let me just do one more here. I may have missed this, but what is the current capacity of the 345 kV cable? Or could you give me KW and I could calculate?
So I think this is a new cable, right? So that's just to level set, where there's not an existing underground transmission line that we're, say, upgrading. These are all new. So they are 345 kV rated cables, so they can handle up to that capacity.
A question about territories, and is there consultation being done with Native American communities? Because there are many areas that are historic and tribal sensitive, and do you have a plan for that?
We do. In fact, the tribal consultation letters are going out today. So
Stay
just so
tuned,
happens,
Sandy.
yes, and it will cover all tribal nations across the footprint of the project. I believe there's 5 or 6. So we look forward to kicking that consultation process off and getting feedback from those stakeholders.
And Sandy, if you need more information, shoot me an email and I'll connect you with Propel. No problem. Next is from Anonymous. How can you not know how much it will cost? Okay. Well, I think because they're not the agency and they're not, it has to be amortized all over New York State. So when we get the final cost, I think we'll know more about that.
So we know the capital cost of the project, and that was part of the NYSO process. The estimated capital cost of the project is $3.26 billion for all of the elements that we went over today. But in terms of the billing, that gets split out, that cost gets split out across all ratepayers across the New York State. We don't have those numbers. We don't control billing.
All right, so there's a follow-up question about the community benefits agreement saying, since Transco is a profit-making corporation, couldn't you use a portion of the profits to do a community host benefit agreement?
That would be far outside of anything we've ever done. Our goal is to keep costs low. That's just part of the reason why the project was selected by the NYSO. So in keeping with that, we typically don't go into those sorts of arrangements. Our goal is to engineer, develop, and deliver a project in the time span that is environmentally responsible, community respectful, and ultimately meets the goals that New York State needs.
And you recently did a project in the Hudson Valley, right?
Similar? We did. We completed a 55-mile, it was an overhead project, but a 55-mile project with a 345 kV and a 115 kV line and several new substations, as well as an overhead 12-mile in Orange County and new substations. So yeah, we're very well versed in this. And again, our goal is to keep costs low.
And but in the same circumstances, you did not, no community benefits agreement.
Correct.
Right.
I just want to ask a question that's been texted me from one of the participants. Will this replace any of the old overhead power lines? Or is this new transmission in addition, to all the existing transmission? Will we be able to get rid of some of the old overhead lines?
This is new infrastructure. We're not replacing any old infrastructure as a part of this project.
Okay. I think it's important to keep in mind that the expectation is that as we're electrifying our buildings for heating and cooling, and we're shifting towards electric vehicles for transportation, that we're going to need more electricity in general. And some say we may need as much as double the amount of electricity that we have today. So there is a great need for additional electric infrastructure.
Okay, and so now there's a bunch of detailed questions. Let me just go back up to Brian is asking again that the answer about the KW. Okay, I'm sorry. The answer doesn't tell me the current carrying capacity in amps of the cable. If you give me the KW, I can calculate it.
It's about 800 MVA for a 345 kV line.
Thank you. Perfect. Also, we have someone asking, anonymous once again, can you share an estimated construction schedule for each line area of the project? For example, when can residents in specific village communities expect the trenching to occur?
So we will have that type of detail, but it will not be until we get into the different phases of the Article 7 regulatory process. We're just too far away from having all of that figured out at this juncture. Right now, we're working on finalizing some of the engineering details, working on survey work, getting the permit applications and studies prepared. As we go through that regulatory process, we will have detailed schedules, and those are obviously up for review and comment through that regulatory process. And then that will get finalized out through the regulatory process and shared with all stakeholders.
So I see a future webinar.
Yeah. No, I remember the construction doesn't start, you said, till 2026.
Mid 2026 is our estimate, but it's based on regulatory review and approval.
No, I know, but I'm just saying for this particular person asking the question, so the closer we get to that timeline, the more details they will have.
Exactly. All right. We are running out of time, but we have, one or two more questions. Has sea life been addressed or considered when running these water underline?
Shannon, I'll take that, right?
Sure.
That is part of the Article 7 process. We will be required to, do benthic surveys of pre-existing habitat, and limit as well as mitigate our impact as much as possible. That's always our goal. Do we have all the answers yet as to, what sea life it is and what type of impacts we're talking about? We're just not that far along in the process yet. We're currently kicking off, the data gathering process as well as the surveys, so we could better formulate what our plan will be for that.
Okay. One more question. I feel like we need to wrap up here. And Article 7 can take 5 to 7 years. Why do you think yours will take only 2 years?
Well, first, we want to put in the most robust package possible to the New York State Public Service Commission, being as complete and thoughtful for every element that's required in that process. We're experienced developers, both NYPA and Transco. We have a history of doing this on other projects that are complex, and that type of skill and lessons learned is what we're bringing to the process and why we're estimating it accordingly. It is a robust process. We do anticipate and hope that there will be a lot of stakeholder engagement throughout that process to ultimately fine-tune the project and get it to be the best product for New York State.
Okay. Thank you. We've answered a lot of questions in a short period of time. Based on where we are in the process here, it does seem as though there will be Propel themselves is going to be holding open houses soon. As Adrian said, if you're on the WindWorks New York list, you'll get those by email. But I'm sure you can also sign up with Propel. And again, as Adrian said, we're going to be emailing out the slide deck as well as a link to this program. And I anticipate that we'll do another lunch and learn or evening webinar about this project as it gets closer. And I know we're always working on more related to offshore wind, so stay tuned on that front.
And I do want to thank everybody. We had 177 participants today. Obviously, there's strong interest in energy infrastructure. And when you have questions, we're going to work hard to try to get you answers. As I said, the purpose of today's webinar is to provide information. Some of this is granular information. For some of you, it wasn't granular enough. But as the project proceeds, we will have more. The object here is to really get the public the information that they're asking and that they want. So I hope it was helpful and education and informative to you. We will have more. And thank you for participating today. Have a great post. Thank you for participating.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. We're signing off.